2. The entity evolved out of the combination of Prakriti and Sakti. And last week we discussed Sakti, the speaker discussed it. However, this student found out that Sakti is all of the powers that is crowned in that. There are 6 of them. Again, we go to the secret doctrine, because I can't remember them all. And she explains it at the end of that article as to what they are. And she tells us Parasakti is one of them, power of light. And the second one is Jnana Sakti.
What language is that?
Sanskrit. Parasakti is important because these powers are in us. And this is where we get 6 of them. Parasakti. Sakti, Icha Sakti, Kundalini Sakti, and I will say what they are in a second. Kriya Sakti, one, two, three, four. Mantrika Sakti is the 6th. Okay, we accompany these powers within ourselves. So, and it's the astral light or akasha. These are all inherent in it. So, the prakriti substance and sakti, which is this, its combination gives us the astral body. This is stated on page 161 of 5 Years of Theosophy. Sakti in itself is accompanied in Kamarupa, which we said was the vehicle of the lower mind, which is constituted of our desire body. I'm sorry, I erased all of it. I'm not putting it back up there, okay? And then it says, the entity evolved out of the combination of Brahman, Sakti, and Prakriti is Jiva, life itself. Very interesting. Shall I repeat that? Brahman is a spirit, Sakti is force or power, and Prakriti is substance, which we said is instant, indestructible, and the powers are in the astral light or akasha. The entity evolved out of the combination of Brahman and Prakriti is our physical intelligence. The entity evolved out of the combination of Brahman and Sakti is our spiritual intelligence, Buddhi, and then a spirit, the emanation from the absolute Brahman or a spirit. So the 3 primaries then give rise to everything else that we as a man are constituted with. And please, you can refer to this page. It's very useful to look at it. Now, what must change in us? How do we realize our immortality? We know that we are, but how do we come to realize it? What must change in us? Well, there is a little recipe at the end of this article here, which was very interesting. It says here, how shall we begin to gain that immortality now and here? Are we to retire to a monastery, go to a nunnery, remove ourselves from the world that we live in? He says, absolutely no, absolutely not. We are to realize it exactly wherever we are. In other words, we can be in the world, but at the same time realize our immortality. It says, we divide matter and the spirit and naturally we divide everything else that arises within them. But in contact with matter, we recognize the indestructibility of matter. As soul, recognizing its relationship to the indivisible one spirit, we should begin to think immortal thoughts and to fight against the inherent activity of our minds, which give birth to mortal thoughts. So we are saying, don't use the lower mind for mortal thinking. Become quiet with your lower mind and allow the energy of the higher mind to interject itself and energize your mind. What is he exactly saying to us? Because we just said that the tendency of the lower mind is that movement. It goes from one object to another object, object, subject, 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 or it's asleep. And when it is not asleep and it is like that, it's going towards insanity. So, to consciously lower the threshold of the mind is what we are being asked to do. And he's telling us you can do this by replacing your thinking process. I have to realize, he says, the immortal nature that is mine and stop the mortal thoughts. And in it, he says, it is to live the holy life, the sacred life, because my thoughts then will become altruistic. What about my feelings? Loving. What about my deeds? What was the third necessary obligatory duty that we had to perform? Sacrifice. So we do our deeds as sacraments. We are no longer interested in the outcome of what we do. We do it because it's the right thing to do. So then this happens as we move towards it. On its own, it cannot come in and exert itself, because there's a student that, okay, well, if the spirit is all powerful, why do I have to go through all this work? Why doesn't it come and do it? Well, because I have abused my powers, whether I know it or not, or whether I remember it or not, is inconsequential. Because I, in a different body, conducted myself in such a way to bring into this life the result of those actions. That we become aware in someone's life that this possibility exists is magnificent. But to follow it is another reality that we have to undertake. That consciously we are to change our thinking by inviting the higher aspects of thinking to come in. In other words, if I think altruistic thoughts, and there are things that happen to us in our environment that interjects itself into our lives, and we personalize it to ourselves, and perhaps we say, you shouldn't have done that. And Mr. Judge says, don't ever criticize another human being. Criticize it into yourself. In other words, sit in meditation and apply that what you just said to the other person to yourself. Only then can we find causative field of action, because most of the time we externalize it to other people what is actually ours. And he says criticism ought not to be undertaken. This is one way to move towards this clearing the thought process. Don't criticize the other. If you're going to criticize someone, criticize yourself and see where that came from. He says only then can you bring about permanent change in yourself. Now that's a very difficult thing to do. My kid is screaming at me and I have to go sit down and say, what on earth did I do that he's acting that way? That is what we're asked to do. Don't tell the child, go sit in the corner and be quiet for the next 5-10 minutes. Maybe that is also necessary. I don't know what the situation demands, but they're saying, look at yourself first to see what you can change so the other person's reaction can change. One way of doing it. Another way is we undertake altruistic work. And in time, he says, this transfers itself to love of all, which is not an easy thing to do, because I have difficulty, and if you can't love everybody, you need to acknowledge it. I have difficulty in this department because our feelings play a role here. To some, you're automatically attracted because of the soul recognition. But then there are other souls who repel your kind thoughts. They twist it perhaps to where they are and then return it back to you. So block it. So this is a real thing. We feel it. Like you go into a crowded place and you're attracted to some personalities and not others. It's natural. It happens to all of us. But then our deeds, when we conduct our work, what did Buddha say actually? In his eightfold way, he says we undertake work that is not harmful to not even one other. First then, we need to think no harm to the other, but in time, benefit to the other. So it replaces itself as you go along on the path, and at the end, when you become what? Humble, a humble servant of what? What are we the humble servant of? It is expressed this way. The army of the voice. We said sound is in Akasha and it's waves, right? Movement. And that sound is actually divine because it brings all of the activity that is going to take place in that Manvantara, or the great age that we're living in. And I think I've run out of my time. So then we become a server of this impulse in nature, and its representatives then are the masters of wisdom who exist from eternity to eternity, and they're exemplars of that: Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, Rama, Muhammad for a lesser cycle, and Confucius for China, and others all around the world bring this to us and emulate it in their own lives so that we can copy it from them and also move in this direction, because this is the inheritance of every human being, and emancipation comes from joining this force which is inherent in the 6 powers of nature, which is in each human heart. And we will stop here and answer your questions. It's a little bit kind of try to pull from different sources to bring it to your attention that it exists, but perhaps under different names. This student also had gathered some information from the Zoroastrian Parsis, but it's tough to give it all. I decided not to put it in here because it's way too much. But if we have time to answer questions, there is a article called Dialogue on the Mysteries of the Afterlife, which is very informative as to what and who we are and what survives and what is dropped off at death, and it truly tells us who we are. And there was one section that I truly wanted to read to you, and this is about the ego, or the permanent aspect, and it is called Sutratma in this, or the thread